Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I am thrilled to have on Nachum Segal, who is probably the most well-known DJ for the Jewish world. He's been on air since 1983 and runs as the president of Nachum Segal Network, which is an online streaming program, but has been on air live for 35 years. So that's pretty amazing. And we go a bunch of different directions in this interview, and I want to sort of figure out how does one person kind of follow their passion and consistently develop their perspective. How do they stay relevant? How do they develop their views and their insights? What's happening in the Jewish world? What's important for the Jewish world? We really cover the gamut today. And I hope that it gives you a lot to think about, because there are a couple of tremendous ideas about how do you cultivate, how do you learn your craft, how do you develop your own individuality, etc. I'm thrilled to share this with you. If there's anything you would be interested in hearing more about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you're interested in the amazing coaching program we have, rabbirupp@gmail.com. With no further ado, I'm thrilled to have on Nachum Segal. Nachum, thank you so much for joining me today. You are really the voice of the Jewish world and have been for many years. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in this amazing radio career and how it's changed over time.
All right. I appreciate that. A pleasure to be your guest. And I thank you for taking the interest in what's happened over the last 35 years. I mean, it is somewhat of a long story, but I'll try to cut to the chase, as we say. When I was at Yeshiva University, actually even before that, when I was planning on going to college, and my mother knew that I was going to be going to Yeshiva University, she said to me, "Check out the radio station there. I think it's something you would enjoy." Now, this is going back about almost 40 years, and the the amazing instinct of a mother, she had a feeling that it would be something I liked. And I go to YU, put in a couple of years there at the radio station, and then by the most amazing stroke of luck, fate, God's hand, call it whatever you wish, the really only full-time Jewish radio effort in the New York area, which was hosted by WFMU Radio, which is where I started, with my full-fledged career. The job became an open job, and they were looking for somebody, and the head of the search committee called Yeshiva University, randomly asked for the director of student activities, who knew me personally and knew I'd give my right arm to do that, to be filled in that position, and said, "You have anybody?" He said, "I'll have someone for you in 20 minutes. And the next day, which was the day before Rosh Hashanah in 1983, I started, and I was there on terrestrial radio till December of 2016. Wow. A nice long stretch. And we decided in the middle of 2016, and with the cooperation fully of the radio station, that because of the nature of our brand, and thank God it had grown to where it had gone, and because of the comfort with which one can now broadcast on the internet, that we would leave terrestrial radio and really not only expand our digital radio network, but really make it a very potent entity. And that's happened now. We've been in this type of format, digital radio, for the last 27 months. It has exceeded our expectations. How things have changed, I think my story just in the last minute or so really tells the whole story about how things have changed. Anybody and everybody can, make believe or be a real radio announcer and disseminate information and be entertaining and informative, because of the nature of digital radio or digital platforms at this point. But we have, we've had a really stronghold, a foothold in the Jewish community worldwide that has built up over the years. And thank goodness, a lot of people seek us out. Our numbers continue to be record-breaking, one day after the next and 1 week after the next, etc.
What's that like? I want to interrupt, because what's that like? Is it as you're sort of looking at your career, and I think it's an amazing thing, because you have to essentially be creative all the time, and you always have an audience that's listening to you, and you can get kind of more or less real-time feedback for you. How do you look at that? How do you keep it fascinating in terms of the success that you have, in terms of the vision that you want to create for your company, for your brand, for the radio, for the Jewish people in general. Like, how do you see that now? Has that changed also?
I don't know if it's changed. I think that I think the nature of why we do it may have changed.
Tell me.
I like when people analyze what I do, both from the radio world and the Jewish world, and conclude that essentially he's leading a gathering of Jews on a daily basis. You know, this is a meeting place for people on a daily basis. Now, I do believe that the nature of the meeting has changed somewhat over the years. You know, years ago, we were the source of news and information. Something happened overnight in the Jewish world. You know, people tuned in the morning and heard, oh my gosh, this is what happened, you know, and that was obviously a very important element. Now I think it's a little different. Now when the Jewish community around the world feels collective pain because of, God forbid, terror attacks or episodes that happen, or political, you know, upheavals that are going on, or important topics that are, you know, becoming vital at the forefront. I think that, you know, this still remains an important meeting place for people to hear what others have to say, for people to just feel the emotion of the day. You know, when, unfortunately, and it's a shame that this is always the example, but unfortunately, when something, when a person or a group of our brothers and sisters become victims of terror, often in Israel, but we know in other places as well, there really is no place for a Jew who cares about their brethren to turn to on a daily basis, to just commiserate with each other, to just feel the pain, to just hear the appropriate songs, you know, that should play on the morning after a terrible tragedy. And we've given that opportunity to people, and they appreciate it. They don't only like the sad and difficult times; they also like the joyous times. You know, we're speaking. I hope it's not a secret. We're speaking during the week of Purim, so people out there are going to be gathering to hear comedy segments and, you know, inside jokes about our community and songs and parodies that are, you know, essential to the Purim holiday. Again, something you wouldn't find anywhere else. I think the characterization of NSN, the Nachum Segal Network, being a meeting place and people to gather together, in this case virtually, I think would be the best description.
Fantastic. Who's been one of the most inspiring people, or someone that's made really a crazy impact on your life that you've had the opportunity to meet as a result of the platform that you have? Or a few people?
Well, I'm not sure if you mean as a guest of the show, or you mean an influence, or a relative, or a political figure. Like, I'm not sure exactly.
You have such a wide variety. I want to leave it specifically ambiguous for the sake that you will find someone that's fascinating for you.
I'll tell you, I've made it known many times that one of the best things about doing what I do is meeting Jewish heroes. And my definition of Jewish heroism is often very different than what others might think. Obviously, you know, you meet somebody who, you know, was involved in an important operation or an important task for the Jewish community. That's a Jewish hero, somebody who cares, who steps up and gets involved and accomplishes a goal. But I think there are a lot of Jewish heroes who, you know, go through regular life day to day and are what other people might call unsung heroes, people who are there anonymously when it comes to charitable causes, people who sacrifice in order to give their children a Jewish education, people who sacrifice often, you know, both financially and in terms of prestige in order to remain in as Jewish an environment as possible. I believe that's a sacrifice, and I believe to an extent that's heroism. And I like to highlight those people. I like to highlight those heroes that, you know, go the extra mile or go beyond what most people would expect just to enhance their own Judaism, or just to help their own community, or sometimes, very importantly, just to advance a really important global Jewish cause. I think those are some of the people. If you want specifics, I could certainly, you know, answer some of that, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Great. So if we were to kind of dive into specifics, was that Jewish, like, were there rabbis that inspired you in terms of getting out there and speaking? Because again, like, this whole medium, even though, like, you know, it has changed so much in the past, you know, couple of years, just the concept that you can reach thousands of people on a daily basis, like, that didn't exist, you know, 100 years ago. So when you are thinking about yourself and kind of the platform and the soapbox that you get to stand on, do you look at other radio people? Do you look at rabbis? Like, who do you sort of see as what you want to kind of link your wagon with, so to speak.
All right. Well, I think there's two separate things. I think that there's a radio category. I pay. I mean, you would you would be shocked. I pay very, very careful attention to how professional radio people operate. I mean, when I was younger, everybody in my circle of friends knew that I analyzed Larry King, to the nth degree, not just because he was popular and had a good interviewing style, but because he, if you would analyze him, would not waste words. He would allow the maximum amount of time for his, like you're allowing me, he would allow the maximum amount of time for his guests to utilize the time he had. He could ask a question that others would ask in 25 to 30 words and do it in 4 or 5 words. And that to me was a very big, had a very big effect on me in terms of being a radio guy. And I always like to say I'm not a Jewish guy who does radio, but I'm a radio guy who does Jewish, because I think that that's my primary thing, is to be really good at this task, at this craft, and then incorporate all the Jewish elements to it. In terms of influences when it comes to Judaism, I mean, I've had plenty of people in my own past, whether it be rabbis or relatives or people I've met, who again have demonstrated a tremendous Jewish pride. Some people might take offense to the following, but I take great pride in presenting authentic Judaism, or at least the way I see it, Nachum Segal Judaism. And and there are people who might want to present a program that may not be as careful about ritual in Judaism. There are others who might think that I'm way too liberal, and they'd prefer to present something that reflects their style or way of life, which would be different in mine. But this is me. This is me presenting Nachum Segal with the Judaism that I enjoy, and highlighting to people out there those who I admire. Now, I'll give you a good example. I have a special love for the Yeshiva University basketball team. Why? First of all, I mean, I happen to love sports, and people know that. But the real reason is because they represent the Jewish people very well, both on and off the court. So some people might hear that and say, "Excuse me, like what?" And they may not realize that every time they take the court in any city around this country as the quote unquote yeshiva Jewish team, they are being analyzed and being looked at, and people want to see what kind of behavior they have, and and how they carry themselves on and off the court. And because of the nature of this team, and I've been following them for 40 years, and thank God they've always been this way, because they take that role so seriously, because they know what I just described to you, that they are representing the Jewish people in everything they do. So that group of guys I admire. I hope that's a good example of what I mean.
It's a wonderful example. I think that something else that's absolutely fascinating is because global Judaism has become so, so everyone can see what everyone's doing, and you pick up whatever Jewish press or mishpacha, and you can see across the world that what you said is absolutely fantastic. The idea that you have to kind of cultivate a Judaism that you are comfortable with, be it that there are going to be people that look at you and say, wow, this guy's way too left wing. Other people that say this guy is way too right wing. How did you develop that level of, I guess, self-confidence, not only to find your own way in Judaism, but then to be very public about it?
Well, you have to remember that when I started, my way was a lot more of the normal way. There was a lot more of me in those days.
For sure. I'm saying that's exactly the point. So, but I'm saying, imagine people that are trying to cultivate their own identity nowadays. Like what you said is so important.
It's funny because, I mean, you're making a very good point, and I appreciate it. But it's funny that at the same time that I've got this Nachum Segal road of Judaism, or my definition of authentic Judaism I like to present, at the same time I've heard a million times over the last 35 years that everybody from every segment of Judaism relates to me, meaning that the person who is completely unritualistic and whose only observance of Shabbos is my Friday morning show, their only connection to Shabbos, that they think I'm like them. And then the Hasidic man who only utilizes me as a nice accompaniment for a few minutes to his morning, he thinks I'm like him and doing what he does on a regular day. And I think there's something to that. I've been able over these years to develop a relationship with my listeners where they can relate. They don't relate to everything. There are things that may make people, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but but that may bring elements of what I do into their lives that they were not familiar with. But there is that relationship that I've been able to form with the listeners where they, I don't know, where they maybe they appreciate the sincerity. I mean, it's been described to me like that. They know that what I'm saying, I mean. They know when I'm celebrating something. Like, take the YU team. They they may think it's ridiculous, but they know that I really mean it. Like, it's just, it's something I really believe in. So I think that's part of it also.
That's amazing. Have you felt that there is pressure? Have you felt kind of an increasing pressure to show up to the right, to left? I think that one of the common things that have kind of come out, certainly in the media world, is that a certain commentator, if he's on a certain network, has to represent this view, and that oftentimes boxes people into essentially becoming just mouthpieces or sound bites. And is that pressure around in our world? Is that something that you feel that you have to either rally against or you've been affected by?
I think only when people detect a little bit of a shaky ground. In other words, the truth is everyone knows what my position is on Israel, and everyone knows generally, the things I enjoy and really take seriously when it comes to Judaism, especially when it comes to ritual, which I'm always emphasizing. But I think when people sense that he's not 100% comfortable with what he just said, or he's not 100% sure, whether he means what he's presenting, then I think they start to pounce. Then I think they see there's an opening, and Nachum, someone like you really shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z, shouldn't be featured. And that, I think, I think that's an amazing ability that listeners have, especially those who know me a long time. If they've been tuned in a long time, they're able to pick that up. But on the stuff that I'm really consistent and solid and present a really formidable, belief in, it's those things that I think most people would never even bother bringing up. I'm just thinking, I think that's one of the reasons why we really celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut on the air. We celebrate Israel Independence Day, to the nth degree, to what somebody could do 6,000 miles away. And so I think that there are a lot of people who would never celebrate it, who enjoy tuning in and having, this long lost cousin of theirs, Nachum Segal, bring that into their lives. And I think generally the longtime listeners would not even start up, the ones who don't believe in what I believe in, at this point wouldn't even bother starting up on an issue like that. But if there's something in there, I mean, I can't give a good example without probably insulting somebody, but if it's obvious that there's a new issue and I'm not 100% comfortable with it, or even an old issue that I just decided to incorporate into the show, but I don't seem 100% fine with it, then I think then people react to it.
So it's interesting because a lot of times I guess you could say, and maybe it's just it's a millennial, post-millennial type of a thing, but what you're saying and what I'm hearing is that people relate to you best when you are kind of genuine to who you are. Right. And I think that there's a much bigger pressure nowadays to sort of figure out what everyone else is saying around you and then kind of figure out where you fall in that line. And you're saying when you start, not necessarily that you're being affected by other people, but when you start to speak outside of where you are really in line, that's when you start to sort of bump into these kind of these pressure barriers. So that's fascinating.
By the way, I wonder if it's really a millennial issue. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
It may have existed, from time immemorial. I'm not sure that just because in this era of social media we're so concerned about what people are saying and what our reputation is out there. I don't know if if it's that much different. Obviously, it happens differently. I mean, we know how social media, how differently it operates compared to getting letters in the mail a few days later. So no question about that. But I don't know if it's that different. I'm not sure. Someone once used the expression to me that I've been grandfathered in, that if I would have started now, I'd be facing challenges that could be insurmountable in the Jewish world, including some of the issues I've brought up, where it wouldn't be that comfortable for me to, present certain things or say certain things. I don't know about that. I'm
taking the bait. What do you mean?
No, even on the Israel stuff, okay. The celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut or the inclusion of certain types of songs and things like that. There are people who would say I get a pass because I'm doing this for so long and I've proven my authenticity. But I always wonder about that. I'm not sure if someone started today with that attitude and made it clear, hey, this is who I am. This is who I am. You don't have to listen. You don't have to listen. You don't have to support us. But I'm not sure how that would play today. I think about that a lot.
How does your day break down? I always am fascinated by that because you have to be authentic. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to be plugged in. So has your day like developed, or what does it look like on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, there's the there's the radio announcer part of the day, and then there's the business part of the day. The day starts very early, earlier than most people.
What time?
Usually the first alarm is somewhere between 4:15 and 4:30.
Nice.
And which is late, by the way, for someone who starts a show at 6 o'clock. But all right, I don't have to criticize myself at this forum. And then, look, there are, it's one of the toughest things. Someone they once did at the old radio station, they did a trading card about me. And in the back, they wrote different facts. First album you bought, first concert you went to, stuff like that. They said worst enemy. So I wrote alarm clocks. It's difficult, especially in the Jewish world. You want to go to a wedding the night before and stay out late. It's very hard. So that's how the day starts. And sometimes I could walk in here at 5:30 in the morning and I'll be bleary eyed. And other days I'm really raring to go. Really.
Are you listening to stuff when you wake up? Are you reading or newspapers, or you're just?
I mean, I'm doing what everyone else is doing these days, which is checking social media and news. I don't even remember anymore. What I was doing 5-10 years ago in terms of keeping up. I do remember though, in my very early days, stopping on the road to the radio station and buying like 5-6 newspapers.
Wow, awesome!
Everything, but these days, of course, that's not necessary. And then the show goes on until 9 o'clock and is usually filled with some interesting interviews and a lot of Jewish music and Divrei Torah, words of Torah every single day. And you never know what else. I think, by the way, that's another factor about our presentations here. 2 things. Number one, we're always live. And when the word gets out and people get into a habit of tuning into live programming, they're much more inclined to make that appointment radio, even in this era of podcasting, et cetera, than when not live. And I think that's one of the things I brought to this whole industry in terms of Jewish radio. People were not used to a presentation. They were used to an hour on Sunday live and things like that. But nobody was used to a guy getting up at 4:30 in the morning and being there for at least 3 hours each morning with a live presentation. So I think that's one thing that's really important.
Because it keeps it fresh and it keeps it like ongoing, and you have to be part of the conversation. And it gets
one other element. I'm sorry, but one other element which I would add to what you just said, that you never know what's going to happen next.
That's right.
Which means that someone could be tuned in and, anywhere from around the world, and all of a sudden, at a moment's notice, we have a really interesting guest that they never would have expected, or a reaction on our app that is really worthwhile and very cool to read, or, and sometimes, earth-shattering stuff and really nice things that people want to communicate to the greater Jewish community. And I think that element, which really comes from my old radio station, that whole free-form element of you never know what's going to happen next, even musically, by the way. Even musically. Now it's odd, though. We're playing a lot of comedy segments. People know it's going to be part of the show, but they don't know when and which one it's going to be. I think that whole element is a very important piece. And then, frankly, I mean, everyone used to think that Johnny Carson worked an hour a day or an hour and a half a night. I think that's one of the things we suffer from is people think that the day ends at 9 o'clock, when in reality,
go back home, go to bed.
That's really when the day starts, because you try to, maintain. We have a big sponsor base, both commercial and contributors, and you try to, do what's necessary in order to keep that going and to maintain everything here. Because without all that, we can't do this, and this is so important to us, and it's something I love doing. So I have a great staff, and we work very hard, and we come up with a lot of special programming. You may have heard of the Kosher Halftime Show. You may have heard of the different trips that we take to France and Venice and different parts of the world. A lot of Israel broadcasts. We do the Celebrate Israel Parade broadcast each year in June. I mean, there's always something happening that we are looking forward to in terms of special events aside from our daily programming. This week, we're broadcasting from a school. There's always different things happening. So that's the day. The day is, being in the office, working hard, looking at the calendar, deciding, what's next and why, and what's important to the Jewish community and why, and what's fun to do. And because it's the fun stuff that gets a lot of attention. And if you can get people out there in the Jewish community to pay attention to the fun stuff, then everything else comes along with it. And I think that's really important.
Man. Okay. There's so much more. I feel like I have to kind of, put it into one One final question. What?
That's it? It's over? I can do this forever.
I just, first of all, the fact that you said that I interview now I'm Larry
Like
King,
Larry King.
that I'm done for the rest of the day. I'm going to go back to bed. But I'm curious, when you look at the future, what are you excited about in terms of your brand, in terms of the work that you're doing with other people, in terms of the message or the impact of the Jewish world or the opportunity? Like, what fires you up about, 5, 10 years, or do you not look like that?
Well, the mission statement of the Nachum Segal Network is relatively simple. We talk about values, presenting programming that has values, appreciated, by the way, by Jew and non-Jew alike, if they in fact are into a value system. We talk about Israel, and it remains paramount to me, the topic of Israel, and bringing it as close to Jews in the diaspora as possible. And
is that something that something that you feel like is becoming more difficult as time goes on? Like 30 years ago, the Jews naturally felt that they were part of Israel. Nowadays, you really have to make a case for it.
Well, sadly, I would say, and remember that the majority of people I speak to are traditional/Orthodox, meaning they're involved in the community, whether they're ritualistically Orthodox or not, or ritually, I should say. I think, sadly, what we've learned from our prophets continues to come true now in 5779, and that is that more and more people grow very used to the comforts of the diaspora. When I say to my staff, when they tell me about an anti-Semitic incident that's happened somewhere in the world, and I say good to them in response, I'm only half kidding, because some people need the help, let's say, of a nefesh b'nefesh, to move to Israel, and others need the reminder that they're living in the diaspora and don't belong there. Now, of course, this sounds amazing coming from a hypocrite like myself who lives in Manhattan, but the truth is that over the years, I've gotten used to the fact that you can live in the diaspora and still demand of your Jewish brethren in the diaspora to seriously consider Israel. That's why, by the way, one of my most important alliances is with Nefesh B'Nefesh. The fact that we're able to broadcast from their plane when they do a charter flight during the summer, the fact that we could put their guests on a regular basis. And we've had listeners who said that they've made Aliyah and credit us, with part of that decision. And it's really important to me, because you just said, what does the next 10 years look like? I have one statement that I make on a regular basis, and that is that the future of the Jewish people is in the state of Israel. That's it. And some people don't believe it. Some people don't want to believe it. Remember, I'm 6.5 feet tall. It's much more comfortable for me to live in the United States than in Israel. So even for me, when I go there and I have to deal with the tables and the sinks and everything else that's a little too low, I say I have a better excuse than anybody else. But you ask about. I think the effort over the next 10 years, as I get older, and eventually at some point wrap up this career, I think it has to be that we've done everything in our power to remind people that the future of the Jewish people is in the state of Israel.
You couldn't edit any better than that. Thank you so much. Nachum, how do people find out more about you and your app and everything you're doing?
I appreciate you asking. NachumSegal.com is the website, and obviously you could just search NSN or Nachum Segal Network, but the easiest way to tune in on a regular basis, 24 hours a day, if you have a smartphone, which I would hope most people in our community do, although maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't know who just heard that. If you have a smartphone, you simply search Nachum Segal Network in your store, and you install it and enjoy it every day.
Amazing, Nachum. Thank you so much for the time. I profoundly appreciate it.
There you have it, folks. Another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.